Mum, do you want to go
Great.
next?
Well, I feel in such exalted company because I am not artistic in any way, form, or fashion, ladies. But I do produce an artist. So that's my claim to art.
I don't know, Mum. You've written quite a lot of poetry and stuff as well. So don't, don't hide your bushels now.
Yeah, well, it's not quite the same thing. So, right, Margaret connection, yes. Well, I was born in the Caribbean, ladies, and in Barbados. And I came here in '79, very cold winter time. I met an Englishman in Barbados, got married in Barbados, and he brought me to this very lovely country. And after, I think, by the summer, or what is British summer, I was desperate to see the sea because Barbados is a very small island, 166 square miles. So you can't go anywhere for 5 minutes without seeing the ocean at some point or the other, even if it's the horizon. So by June, I thought, well, that's it. I thought, well, I have to see the ocean. So I asked my husband, where is it? How far do we have to go to get to the sea? So he said, 50 miles is the nearest way to the beach. So I said, okay, right, that's it. So we were off. And he took me to Brighton, of course, which is the nearest beach, more or less physically from London. And when I stood on Brighton Beach, I was, okay. I was flabbergasted. I did not even looking at the ocean, but the sheer amount of stones on the beach. It was like, how can you have so many stones on the beach? It just blew my mind because I've never seen some stones on the beach. You know, in the Caribbean, it's just all fine sand, like sugar, like granulated sugar. So I spent some time just staring at these smooth stones, just trying to inhale this other kind of feature. Wow, okay. And I said, isn't there anywhere with sand? So I said, okay, the next trip we do, we go to Margate because that has got sand. So we did eventually get to Margate. And to me then that was like the closest I would get to a Caribbean style beach. The beaches were wide, there was actually sand. The color was slightly different, but that was the point is it was sand. You can physically hold it in your hand, you can sit on it. And that was my connection to the Caribbean. So I think Christina may have been about 2-ish or thereabout when I first took her to, I wasn't driving at the time, but another Barbadian friend of mine, we used to get the train and we would take the kids down to Margate for a day trip. Get off the train, walk to the beach, stay on the beach all day, get back on the train and go back to London. We didn't explore the town or nothing. We just wanted to be on the beach, let the children play and dig in the sand and stuff like that. That has always been my kind of spiritual place, just watching the ocean and being on the beach. So we did that for a while, and then there was this huge gap. Then we hadn't been back there for years until she had this during the commission. We decided, okay, we're going to for a week, spend a week in Margate. I thought I haven't been here for so long. You heard different things about Margate had been downhill and blah blah blah. So after this long time, we went again. Like when I got out the train station, I was like, okay, trying to think, which way did we go? Because it just seemed so different to, in the 80s, when I've been in the 80s, there was this huge gap, 30 years or thereabout that since I've been there. But then when I was walking towards the beach, I thought, okay, so that's all came back. No, they had a wind farm. That wasn't there in the 80s, so already can see a different change. Some things were exactly the same. The beach was more or less not physically different, of course, but that I could see by some buildings were added and stuff. So the changes weren't huge, but there was still some change. But the beaches of itself was still there. The sand was still there, which was the most important thing, So we went for long walks that we spent with Christina and her family down the beach and so on. So I ended up being reacquainted with that time and then seeing then what was new and what was different, because we hadn't walked along the beach in any distance because we had little kids, so they just wanted to play and we just sat there and chat and talk and so on. So it was nice to explore and see, parts of it and see how it changed and walk along the top of the cliffs, for miles. You can walk along the cliffs for miles. It's a different elevation from the top looking at the ocean. from being on, you know, on the stand looking at the ocean. So it was really nice. It was really nice. It gave you a kind of strange feeling, but just a reconnection, you know, from a very long time ago, really. So, and then when she talked about this, she's going to apply for this Turner Commission and so on. And as I always say to her, you got nothing to lose, everything to gain. So go for it.
Right, yeah.
At least you tried, and if you don't succeed, you would know that you tried. So she went and she got it, and she was always the most surprised person when anything happens. And you know, so just there to support her and whatever she's doing, and encourage her, you know, to just keep going and going. So that's it, really. I am a retired teaching assistant. That's my profession. Nothing artistic. Yeah. So at the moment, I am homeschooling my grandson, which is her only son. So that's keeping me busy.
It's a big one for like, because to me, like, I know, you know, you speak about practice and stuff, but I think with Mum, she's kind of like my cultural and intellectual muse, really, because whenever I have projects or these proposals and things, I speak to them about them, and I talk to them about them. And then all these kind of like stories can't start flowing, because I think, you know, when Mum talks about Barbados, you know, as a kid growing up in two places, you know, Barbados, and especially with my gran and stuff as well, it was to me very much like supernatural. You know, the key things I associate with Barbados was sort of that sea, that clarity, you know, but you could see the fishes and everything. And there was a juxtaposition between, like, you know, the British Sea and stuff, like, you know, going to Margate and things, one that you can see through, that you can see the life kind of going through it. And then like on a British beach, it would be like maybe what comes up onto the beach or whatever, because you couldn't see through to see the life like going through all these things like coral and stuff as well. Like, so Mum would collect corals and stuff, and she'd bring them home. So we, you know, when people have like maybe the good china, you know, with the nice teapots or whatever in the display case, Mum would have like coral all over, like set around the fireplace.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and it was just like, you know, you'd have fang coral, brain coral, all different kinds of coral, maybe, you know, sea urchin shells and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, with Gran would be like, you know, Gran was a larger than life character in my mind, especially when you're little, you know, and you have that person, it's just like, I don't know, that kind of female kind of like bombastic, dynamic kind of character, you know, the matriarch, and she was very much that. And, you know, Gran was she was a seamstress, but I thought she was one of the most talented people I'd ever known, because I think in Gran's generation, you know, you went to school, you only went to primary school, so you left school and you're like, what, about 8, 9, and then you'd go and like, you know, live in apprenticeship or trade for like 5 years. So, you know, and she did it with a tailor. I've never seen anyone like pattern cut like Gran. Do you know what I mean? She just take the tailor's chalk and just whoosh before you know it, and then you'd have all this, you know, everything looked kind of like 1950s, 1960s cut whenever you had clothes. It always looked very vintage. But it was that extraordinary thing, you know, and eating like raw sugarcane at dusk when Gran would be telling you stories about biblical stories, but then also ones about folklore and stuff, and then the sounds, things like whistling frogs and the cicadas and the sound of water like lapping on seas and stuff like that. And then the juxtaposition of when you were in England, and my gran who lived in Sussex, and she had this, you know, red brick Victorian house, and she had a bit of land around it, so you'd have like woodlands covered by bluebells, and you know, it was just, you know, like, you know, stories like Grambley Hedge and Just William and all these kind of like this kind of archetypal kind of English kind of countryside. And it was just like, they were such stunning but different places, and the stories that you create as a child and the way in which these places come together. So I don't know, I think I always kind of have this cyclical kind of changing between these different cultures and the different places, and then that hybridity or that plurality, I think, you know, and it just gives you such a kind of like density, because I think everyone's kind of shared stories with this kind of like movement, whether it's place or whether it's excavating, like, you know, our narratives and different things. And it's just, I just find that kind of the creation of your own mythology and stories and narratives and the people within it, you know what I mean? So like the people, you know, family in the Caribbean being very kind of larger than life characters, you know, and then in England having the same thing but in different ways, you know, an eccentricity and this very, we grew up with in a very, very big Caribbean community as well, through cricket and different things, you know, all over the country for cricket. And it's amazing how Caribbean and like British people, they always used to make me laugh, because I remember I remember, like, you know, you go for Barbados High Commission, so they had their own cricket team. So you travel up to the country, I don't know, like Peterborough, or go into the beautiful, like, these cricket pitches. You know, you go maybe strawberry picking with mum, you know, while they're all playing, and all the women and the kids would sit at the front of the coach, and all the men at the back of the coach. There'd also be a crate of rum at the back of that coach, or for everyone else. You know what I mean? Or when you had, you know, then when they had tea. You know, it just used to make me laugh because, like, you know, Dad, who was, I also say, was probably like the one white man of this, like, cricket team. So they go pick up their little tuna cucumber sandwiches and things like that, and they'd be, like, terribly polite and stuff. And then they'd go outside, and all the mums would have been open all these, like, boxes or the car boots or whatever, and you'd have chicken and rice and peas and gravy and all this, like, full buffet over a load of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. You know,
Real food,
so, I just, even as a kid, remember laughing because I'd watch all these, like, karaoke kids. Oh, that's so lovely. Yes, that's some lovely tea. I'll just have a cup of tea and a tuna sandwich. Great. And they sit down because you didn't want to be rude, and then they go have like a full plate of food.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you don't know what's moving too quickly off that boundary. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, mate, you know what? Just let it go. Just let it go because you've got half a ton of food in your stomach. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, you could have reached for that, mate. I'm just saying, you know. Yeah. You could have reached for it if you had half a chance, Dad. You know, you didn't really just watch it go by.
Yeah.
But I appreciate, because we talk quite a lot, actually. I thought doing more stuff, so I appreciate people's time, because I know I kind of said like 11 till 12. And I really appreciate even just how much you shared in terms of introducing yourselves and things. And I'd love to know more about what you're doing. And I appreciate, as it is 12, if people have to leave, that's absolutely fine. But I think with Mum as well, like in that Caribbean, that idea of like gullies and rainforests, because we've also talked about those kind of like woodland areas and different things. And I think that the spirituality of those places is also really fascinating. Mum, like growing up with on those beaches, and you see those stories. So I also have to make like a graphic novel that's going to tie this kind of digital work with these sculptures that we film on the beach. So I'm using like kind of special like visual effects, working with a studio to do them and create these kind of like full films, and then overlay this audio over it and have this kind of graphic novella, if you like. And I use a lot of like you know, archival footage and things we have in the family, as well as like different things from footage that I've taken. And I just really appreciate you just sharing.
Yeah. You know what, Chris? Also living in England for the last 40-something years has given me such a different view of our beaches in Barbados, because I have seen such dramatic changes from when I was a child living in Barbados to now as an adult. Going back, I have basically been back to Barbados probably almost every year since I'm in this country, because my parents are still alive, they're still there. But the whole environment, the sea environment has changed so dramatically. We've had so much erosion in the Caribbean, Barbados too as well, but all along that Caribbean area of islands, we've had severe erosion, constant storms, you know, talk about the planet change, all these things. So it has already affected the Caribbean in a huge way. We get we have hurricane season every year, so that means we do get, even if the island isn't, we don't particularly get, Barbados being the most easterly islands, usually we're very lucky weather-wise, but we do get small storms and stuff. And the beaches there's been severe erosion over the last 40 years.
Because we were talking about, say, like the coral reefs.
The beaches, you know, something when I think about as a child, the width of beaches that we have, you know, it has changed a lot. A lot of the beaches are so much more narrow than when we were children. Whereas I said, you would have a hotel, you would have, you know, could be 6 rows of chairs, and you would still have enough space to have a beach cricket game. All of that is gone. It was all gone. You know, constant storms and stuff like that. The topography has changed drastically through the Caribbean. You know, the climate change and stuff like that, and really noticeable because I've been away from it. Each time I go back, I notice something else, which before as a child wouldn't have been in my reference whatsoever. But because of remembering the difference, now on that, you see the difference, you know?
But I think, like, as well, we were talking, like, Mum, about that collecting of corals, like the amount, like the coral reefs and stuff, how many of them have been taken out, whether it's been through bleaching, whether it's been through pollution, a lot of like when it comes to any number of reasons, whether it's like kind of partly through tourism, partly through like, you know, when you think of the infrastructure, sanitation, all those different kinds of things. And
even bad weather, if you get bad weather, a lot of corals get broken with bad weather because from where it's action. You know, after bad weather, you get lots of sea urchins on the beach, you get black coral, you get brain coral, you get different sky coral, you know. And you don't see very much of that these days. You know, when I was a child, you patrol the beach after bad weather, just looking for treasures, as we call them. Now you very rarely see any of that now. You know, you have to go on the eastern side of the island where you've got the Atlantic Ocean now to see that residue from bad weather.
Because I think there's something about corals that I find fascinating that way, because I think especially this idea of like, say for this, like when corals fluoresce, so you have like a fluorescent, some of them can fluoresce, so, you know, where you have like almost like light languages and bioluminescence like at night, or whether the UV and they change. But also this idea that to protect themselves, almost like I think the equivalence is something like a sunscreen when you have like rising sea temperatures, that they put off this, they kind of create this covering like a fluorescence. And hope, you know, a lot of the time maybe it might be a stage just before they actually end up bleaching, you know, if that can't protect them. And many times, you know, I kind of, this idea and linking that a lot of the time from what I saw with like, I think Caribbean communities protecting themselves, and this kind of cultural solidarity through like things like creative production and stuff. You know, when you think of like Notting Hill Carnival, so that's like the biggest street carnival in Europe, I think maybe second or third maybe in the world. And for many, I think that's something where, you know, for me, I'm sure it is a great party and stuff, but I remember attending that with mum since we were little. And it was like, you know, it was there because you had to support your community. You there, it was a way, you know, that creative production, that collective creative production of multiple islands. So it wasn't just one, you're talking multiple islands coming together. So you unify yourselves and you connect through the best parts of the creative practice of your cultures. And that idea of that saturated colour and fluorescence, and this idea of creative production almost as your own sunscreen, is that kind of fluorescence against what is acute kind of maybe persecution, marginalisation, racism, all these different kinds of things. And I think that's something that really kind of sits with me, this kind of ecological kind of coloured protection, and then the human production of creative protection to look after yourself. And I think that's very much akin to something that I find in my practice when it comes to things like, you know, mental health and well-being. Like I had a lot of complications when I had my son, and it was very, very difficult birth. And you know, and then I had like postnatal depression afterwards. And I think, you know, my practice was so critical in getting me back into who I was, because it was like so many things just kind of got lost in having a kid and stuff, and, you know, just reorientated and changed. And it was like the one thing I was like, right, I know that's me, everything else has changed, but I can hold on desperately to this one thing, and I know that's always who I was. So it was just this kind of finite like little piece of who I was that I just tried to dig in the ground and in bed and hold on to get me through when everything was just floating what felt like all over the place. And I think that's just, it's in lockdown as well, I think that's been a massive thing. So even with this idea of like, you know, kind of this kind of group studio session, if you like, you know, if you're in art college or whatever, you'd all have your little booth or whatever. It's just the idea, just on a human level, just connecting with people, connecting with audiences, or connecting with other artists, just to kind of, just as in a relationship, just as a friendship, do you know what I mean? Or as a human connection to talk, and especially all being women as well, I think, which has been delightful. I mean, that also of itself, this practice of like textiles and craft and that longevity throughout, it seems through every kind of production, is really fascinating.
Well, I've found during